Okay, we're going to start. If you do have questions, you can use the chat box to ask some of the question. I do want to mention before I start that this session will be recorded. I hope you're okay with that. This is going to be recorded and we're going to be sharing it with folks who could not attend today. So, and if you have any questions, we will allow for questions at the end of this webinar. This is going to be about 40-minute presentation. Is going to be a slide deck plus a quick demo of the solution. How can you automate your account payable? And we're going to allow for 15 minutes at the end of this webinar for your question and to address any questions you may have. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to look at, obviously, account payable can be very painful when it's manual, when it's a manual process, from data keying, from flowing and transferring document among peers. And namely now, precisely because of the pandemic, it's even more painful and riskier to handle document manually. Hence, the timing of this webinar. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to look at some of the challenges and where are some of the opportunities lie, the benefit of process automation in general, and account payable, precisely account payable. And we're going to look, how does it work? What to look for when you're actually looking for a solution or a partner, because those are two key ingredients in any digital transformation project, is what to look for and who to partner with. And we're going to conclude this session with AP automation performance indicators. And we give you some of the operational indicators that you can measure your own performance after and before and after implementing the solution. Also, some of the indicators that you can look at from a saving perspective. So typically in a manual process, some of you, if you do have manual processes, especially in AP, you probably are encountering some of these issues. These issues, this list, I gathered that from our customers, and we do a survey before starting and partner with any customers, and we notice sometimes there are double payment or duplicate payment. Sometimes we look for invoices. Because of the validation process, the invoice travels from one person to another. So sometimes that there are lost or forgotten invoices on a desk somewhere that are not waiting for approvals. We found that a lot of accounting staff struggle with continuous reminders with suppliers. I need to be paid. Do you have any status of my invoice on my invoice? That kind of questions. We found a lot of our customers, between 40 to 50%, are not really taking advantage of what we call the early payment discount. You know, some of the vendors offer early payment discounts and folks are not fully taking advantage of that. In addition to all search and archiving costs, you know, when you manage documents, you have to archive them. And anytime you need the invoice or that document related to that invoice, you have to go and search for it, and it takes time, it takes space and effort as well. So what are some of the stats, just to look at some of the opportunities? So what we found that 87% of AP automation are people who implement AP automation benefit about 87% from a time saving perspective. And if you're asking a question of where does that lie exactly? So saving, when we talk about the time, is the data keying, because that's going to be automated instead of keying an invoice. The matching with POs, that's also a big saving. So the software, typically most of the software can handle two-way and three-way, we'll call them two-way and three-way matching. Early payment discount, I touched on that. And that's mostly when we speed up the life cycle of the invoice. We can process as an invoice very quickly within hours instead of days in a typical manual process. It also comes up 64% of folks that we interviewed mentioned that the benefit from an accurate processing, meaning we don't have data key and errors, we don't have duplicate payment, and we have automated verification of that invoice. And about 59% they say that they have an easier access and control of the process. We're going to look at some of that when we show you the demo. It's very quickly when you need an invoice, you look for an invoice, it's enough to key 3 first letters and you get the invoice and you can see it, you can share it internally, externally, you can flow it or you can submit it or process it through a workflow. It's very easy to do. So those are some of the opportunities. Obviously, those are time, cost, and visibility. So that's a good segue to my next slide, which is the benefit. So we lower the processing costs. It is paperless. This is pandemic friendly. So that's very timely. I mentioned earlier that we can do that with API automation, you benefit from automated invoice to PO matching. Some of the solution, but at least our solution, have an easy mobile access to the validation. You can validate on the fly, wherever you are. So if you're in the office, your firm, if you're somewhere, you can validate your invoices. It's very quick and simple. It reduces the in-processing costs and shortens the life cycle of that process. Plus, in my opinion, having been in finance myself as a CPA, I have been in finance for years. One of the biggest pluses that I foresee, that I see in API automation, is the end-to-end visibility. So when I'm doing my forecast, when I'm looking at my accruals, my month end, my year end, that visibility, that access to that information very quickly, for me, it's a bigger value than the cost itself. But that's the biggest benefit in my opinion. So how does it work? Typically, I listed some of the sources on most of the sources you'd probably see. When an invoice comes from a vendor, I know in Canada, most of the invoices come electronically via email. You can configure an email address, and when you get those invoices, they will automatically come to the solution. You don't have to process them. You don't have to send that email to accounting, but the software should be able to handle those emails, capture the invoices, and capture the data automatically from that invoice. If you do still receive, and my recent stats I did with customers, there's between 15 to 20% of folks still receiving invoices physical, like in a paper format. That paper format, if you receive it via paper format, it has to be scanned, and that's via scanner. So when it's scanned, it feeds directly to the solution, and we can also receive invoices via mobile. We can receive invoices via fax. I'm not sure if folks are still using the fax, but I haven't seen it lately. I haven't seen a lot of people are still using fax. I think the fax it's pretty much done. It's the end of his life cycle. We can also sync the solution, can sync with typically with a local drive or OneDrive. If you happen to have invoices, some of the customers happen to have invoices on their servers or local computers. It's nice to have a solution that can sync directly with your local server, a local computer, so to not repeat that work, and for multi-users. So really what you need to find is that a solution that can handle all sources of invoices. And not only now, you look at it now, but you look at it for the future as well. So if today you're receiving paper-based, but tomorrow you're going to be receiving them via email, you want a solution that be able to evolve and be able to handle that in the future. You don't want to be limited in a solution that handles what you have right now, but rather where you're going, what you have now plus the future, okay? You want a solution that handles mobile as well. So either via web forms. So when you have an invoice, have a receipt, you want to submit that to accounting. You want to be able to do that online using your mobile. That's a nice feature to have in the solution. So the solution also should have workflows from a validation perspective. Even if your current size does not require workflows, make sure you include that in your requirements, because workflows, when you grow, when you have a bigger team, if you don't have a bigger team already, when you have a bigger team, you're going to need workflow. What does that mean? Workflows meaning I can flow the document or the invoice and all the support document from one person to another in a dynamic way, so they can approve it, they can reject it, or they can add comments or whatever the action needs to be. You want a solution that has a dashboard that allow you to analyze that data. So what else to look for from a solution perspective? Some of the really key and critical elements to look for when you're looking for an AP automation solution. One is easy integration with your accounting software. Remember, AP automation solution does not replace the accounting system. It should interface and integrate well with the accounting system. Whether that system is on-prem, what am I calling by on-premise? On-premise, for people who are not familiar with the concept, is a solution. You have an accounting system that installed on your computer or on your server, which means in-house, on your premises. You want a solution that be able to integrate with on-premises solution. A lot of solutions nowadays connect with the cloud, but you do not handle the on-prem. You want to have that functionality to be able to integrate with on-prem and cloud. So that flexibility is really good to have. I know a lot of folks look for typically when you think about AP automation, they think about the ERP, which is the accounting system. You want a solution that handles both the ERP and CRM, because today you're going to need it for the ERP from an accounting perspective. Or when I need by ERP, what I mean by ERP, at least the major providers of ERP system, that solution has to integrate with them. When I see, if you're a big size company looking at something like SAP, looking at something like Dynamics 365, if I know finance and operation, looking at, if you're a medium sized or smaller size, looking at Sage, looking at Dynamics 365 Business Central, Navision, Great Plain, QuickBooks, NetSuite are all common solutions that the software need to integrate with, the AP solution need to integrate with. That's something very critical to have. If you're going to need some of that information in your CRM, especially if you do project costing for customers. It's nice to have an integration with CRMs, whether Microsoft CRM or Salesforce CRM. Those are key integration to have. Okay, that's one big pillars. The second big pillar to have and to look for is the workflow management. And you would like to have a solution that has dynamic workflows. What does dynamic workflow means? Meaning, if I have a policy, a delegation policy in my company saying that all invoices should flow based on the amount in the invoice. For example, some company says, okay, anything between less than 10 grand, it goes to the accounting manager. Between 10 to 20 grand, it goes to the director of finance. Above 20 to 100 goes to the CFO. Above 100, it goes to the CEO, or goes even to the board. You want to have a solution that can allow and dynamic enough and flexible enough to allow for you to configure easily your workflow. Remember, solution, in my opinion, it's not about you adapting or your processes to the solution, but rather look at your processes and see how streamlined they can be and make sure that the solution can adapt to those streamlined processes that you need. You want to have a solution that what we call in the tech language with jargon, we call it multi-tenant solution or multi-site solution, multi-company solution. So if you have multiple entities, you'll be able to handle those entities. Typically, why I give the example, when I talk about multi-tenant, it's like having every company, every firm, you have multiple firms, multiple location. Each location will have its own admin and its own users. They can share documents between themselves, but if you don't want it based on the permission, people would not be able to see invoices for each entity. So one person can see all, or a group person can see all. But if you have multiple entities, each one of them will see its own invoices, okay? You want to have electronic signatures because now during the pandemic and even before the pandemic, electronic signature are big plus. So you want to be able to sign, add a stamp, and you want to have, like if you work with DocuSign and integration with DocuSign, those are key elements to have in the API automation solution. The second, the third pillar to have, those are the critical ones. I'm really listing for you guys today the critical element to have in your API automation. Intelligent data capture. What I mean by that is whether the document is structured, meaning same format of the invoice, or non-structured, meaning that the format of the invoice will change from one day to another, or change from one vendor to another. So make sure that the solution will be able to handle both without having to change the configuration. I know a lot of folks, a lot of solutions have what we call zoner OCR, meaning they configure the format based on zones. And anytime you change the format, you will have to change the configuration. That can be very painful. And what's happening currently in this field, there is the OCR combined with machine learning. Ideally, you would have a solution that has both machine learning and OCR, and to be able to capture the data, whether the document is structured, and if tomorrow changes the format, one of your vendors changes the format of the invoice, you don't have to redo the configuration. That would save you a lot of time. The other thing to have from a data capture perspective is what we call line item data extraction or data capture. So as you know, the invoice has the amount, the date, those are global fields that all invoices do, but invoices have products and each product has quantities, has price. That's what we call line data capture. And depending on your PO, because the solution it should have a verification process to do what we call the two-way or three-way matching. To be able to do that, you need a line data capture. So meaning capture each product, the quantity, and it will go to the PO and we'll look at the quantity. Does it match the quantity in the PO? That's good. Does it match the price that we set up in the PO? When you have that, when you have the line data capture, it will allow you to do that matching with the PO and also with the reception if you have the good receipts. Okay, the other thing you need to know from a solution perspective, it should have a capture from statement, bank statement, because you're going to see that you're not only capturing data from invoices, but you're capturing data from statement, from receipt. You want a solution that's flexible enough to be able to handle all those time documents. Okay, the other thing is, so when you receive invoices, as you know, some of the invoices come one page, some have 10 pages. You want a solution that has a smart document recognition that can split the document without any manual intervention into different invoices. So if you're getting invoices from a bunch of for several vendors, you don't want each one, and you don't want a user to go and split each document. So you want a solution. If you scan or if you integrate 100 invoices, the solution should be smart enough to split those documents and those invoices for you. Okay. You want an invoice that flags any duplicates. Typically, what we use in the concept, so we use basically the invoice numbers plus the vendor. If a vendor Y or X send me an invoice or send me 2 invoices with the same number, I will recognize that's a duplicate. However, it does happen sometimes that vendors have same numbering systems and you will have the same number from different vendors, and that should be okay. But from a duplicate perspective, if you have an invoice, the same number from the same vendor submitted twice, the solution should flag that one. Should also have a versioning, so the version, if any changes in that invoice, you should be able to restore it. You should be able to have a version, so version 1, version 2, whatever document. But also from an audit perspective, it's really nice functionality to have Audit Trail to see who modified the solution, who modified the invoice, who that uploaded it, who worked with it, and so on. Other stuff that you want to have in the solution is the automated verification. So you don't want to do manually verification with your POs, verifying the amount, checking if the amount on the lines are equal to the total of the invoice. Those stuff you shouldn't be doing that manually. It should be done electronically for you. And you should have a solution that fits, and you can add your own rules. For example, one of my rules is all the invoices should have a PO number, or all the PO or the invoices should have a project number. I should be able to add that very easily and very quickly. So I'm gonna take just a quick 1-minute video to show you one of our videos about AP automation, and I'm gonna continue the slide later.
With the increasing digital transformation efficiencies, automating accounts payable is a priority for any business. Are you still keying in vendor invoices, verifying and reconciling them to purchase orders? Are you tired of chasing invoices and approvers? Welcome to eDoc 360, Accounts Payable Automation Solution. Whether it's invoices, receipts, billing statements, credit card payments, eDoc 360 accurately extracts the required information from all kinds of formats. The solution provides an automated verification in addition to 2-way and 3-way matching with purchase orders and good receipts. Exceptions are channeled to various approvers using the solution dynamic and configurable workflows according to the company policy. eDoc 360 has a pre-built configuration, making it easily operational within the first 2 days of implementation. It integrates with several ERP systems including Sage, Dynamics NAV, AX, QuickBooks, and SAP. eDoc 360 is also a secure and easy access to information within seconds. An operational cost savings of over 70%, and mastery and full visibility of the AP process.
Yeah, that's a small video that shows you, that's a brief video that shows you the process of based on our solution. And I'm gonna dive a little bit into it, just show you the solution, how it works as well. So in here, so in here, when you have an invoice, You can see the invoice. You can see all the metadata, what we call them, the data captured from that invoice, like the invoice date, the invoice number, all that information. You don't have to key it manually. You see the invoice, but you also see the workflows process. Like in here, in this case, I have 3 folks who are involved in the process. They have Maria, who has approved this invoice. They have Keith, who's still in progress. And they have the administrator, who's also involved in the workflows and has not approved this in the process as well. It's very easy to quickly start typing, and you can see the invoice, whatever invoice you want, and you click on it and you get that invoice. I also mentioned history, like you can have a full audit trail of the invoice on that document. Who modified it, who changed it, when the version was changed, when the workflow was changed. You can have. You want a solution like this is an example of solution. I'm not trying to put a lot of I'm not trying to promote our solution, but what I'm showing in here is just an example of solution that shows you how a solution should look like in order to automate your AP. So beside capturing the data, you want to have an audit trail. You want to manage notification. If I want, for example, somebody to be notified anytime there is a change in this process, it should be able to anytime there is a new comment, a new modification, a new workflow change, we should be able to handle that. We should be able to be notified. I mentioned this electronic signature. You should be able to have electronic signatures, workflows. Workflows, what's good about the workflows, it saves you a lot of time when the document flows from one person to another, but also gives you a visibility on who is in that workflow. Like in here, you see in here, this person has this, I have this to be approved. I can approve it, validate it, I can reject it, or I can delegate this task or reassign it. What does that mean is if I get the invoice by mistake and I want to reassign to one of my team members, I can easily do that. If I want to delegate, I'm fully busy right now, or I'm going on a business trip. I know that's very limited right now, but whatever the reason is, I cannot validate. I can delegate this one. I can also add files if I want to have files in here. Support document. I can add any document I want and just quickly add it to this invoice. And I can only easily share this invoice with anybody. So if I get a link in here, I can share it internally, or I can share it with what a functionality called Easy Share, even externally. Even if somebody does not have a login and a password, they can still see this invoice if I want them to do so. I have permissions, and the permissions I can see you have a view permission, which is I can just only read. I have an edit permission. I can edit basically and change the document. I also have another set of permission, which is I can manage the rights and the users in this document, to this document. Plus, we have the admin rights, obviously. Invoices, and from a search like functionality, when you capture the data in here, you have 3 types of searches. You have what we call the quick search, which is the one I showed earlier. I start typing, and the list of the documents starting with those letters will show up. We can also have what we call multi-criteria search, which basically I can search based on multi-criteria from that invoice or from that document. I can see from a time it was modified to what time it was modified, amount based on the status of that invoice, all the invoices that have been rejected, have been approved, and that's a key information to have and very quickly to have that. So it's very similar to what you have probably from a Windows perspective. You're familiar, if I look at the left side in here, familiar with the Windows application, you can have like a tree type structure, and you can access to the folder where you want, which folder you want to go to. But also you have this multi-criteria. You can combine criteria without going specifically to that folder. I just go in here and do my multi-criteria, and I will find the document that I'm looking for with all the history behind it. So from a data capture piece, I mentioned the data capture piece. You want to have ability to manage or to get documents in here and to get data, whatever data you want, whether it's that document is structured or non-structured. You want to have a smart solution that allows you to capture data, even to know, start building intelligence about the vendors. If a vendor always waits day, month, year versus month, day, year, the solution should be smart with a machine learning engine, be able to recognize that and capture the right date for you. So that's a quick overview of the solution. I'm going to go back and talk about some of the performance indicators that you should look for, and I'm going to open up for questions. So I'm back at the performance indicators. So there are operational, I'll call them operational performance indicators. When you start automating your processes or start automating your accounting, typically we look at 4 indicators. One is I want to see how many invoices I have in the pipeline. And I want to see the status of those invoices. Are they approved, or are they still in progress, or have I not started with them? Because as a director or as a manager of finance, I want to see how many invoices I still have to pay and how many are in the process, how many have been approved that I need to pay, and when is, and that I can source that by due date. So that's one of the key indicators. The other thing is if you have a lot of invoices and you want to take care of or take advantage of the early payment discount, it's really important to manage and to monitor the average processing time. So if my early payment is usually within 10 to 15 days, I would like to map out my whole process within few days so I can take advantage of that. That's a second indicator that's extremely important in order to take advantage of the early payment discount. From a follow-up on the workflow process, I want to see how many should be approved. Basically, every approver or person is going to approve that invoice, get a notification from the solution saying, okay, you have this invoice to approve and you have 5 days to approve it, whatever, based on your configuration. That person can choose to approve it, reject it, or sometimes they omit to do so. If they omit to do so, you should be able to see a dashboard of all the invoices that still have to be approved. Obviously, the amount, if you're doing your month-end close, your year-end close, the amount is key to have. What is the amount that's in process that has to be approved? That's particularly important for a couple of reasons. One is from a forecasting perspective, I can see all the invoices that have to be approved. And second, I can do any accruals that I want, whatever, based on the in progress invoices. Okay. Other indicators are early discount savings. So you want to see how much of the early discount you're saving. Who are your vendors? Do they offer early discounts? Are you taking advantage of that? And with AP automation, it should allow you to reduce significantly the life cycle from days to hours and hence take advantage of the early payment discount. Okay. The time savings, that dashboard I showed earlier, it should show you how much time. If you are embarking on an AP automation journey, you will have before and after, and you will see how much time it takes you to process an invoice. The stats I have seen is typically people take between 3 to 10 days to 15 days to process an invoice, if depending how complex your workflow is and how complex But if you use an API automation, that time you start talking about hours within a few hours rather than days. And I've seen a lot of the experience from the field. I've seen a lot of folks, the timing, it becomes very, very easy to approve or to review invoices because you can do that on mobile. And hence, instead of looking an average of 3 days approval in a manual process, using a solution, you see that people approving within hours, 2 hours, 3 hours max. So people are typically with technology, they start approving way faster. Operational costs, that's a huge one. We did a study and we looked at, we found that in a manual process, people spend between $10 to $15 per invoice. If you account for the time, for the data keying, for the travel, for the handling, for the approvals, you're looking at about $10 to $15 per invoice. When you automate, you start looking at $1, $2 per invoice, and you can see the amount of saving you have from an operational cost perspective, especially if you have large volume of invoices. One of the key things, and that's my my favorite one, is looking at the percentage of value-adding activity. So if I have an employee, and typically that's a question I get when we embark on API automation, are people looking at saving from employees? I personally don't look at those as saving, but I rather look at those. If I have an employee who is doing currently manual data keying, tomorrow I would like that employee be able to do analysis, be able to look at vendors, be able to look at early payment discounts. Those that for me are key. So don't look at it as saving an employee, but rather redirecting the effort of that employee toward more value adding activity. And that's, in my opinion, that's one of the best pluses, because that employee has a lot of experience, has a lot of knowledge about the process, and you will get a lot of we get bigger return investment from redirecting that employee to more value adding activities. I think that's why I planned for you today. I'm going to open the chat now if you have any question, and I'm going to answer any questions you may have. Let me know if you have any questions. Any questions? So one of the questions I often get is how long it takes to implement the solution. So the solution, as I showed in the video, is all the configuration. We basically, the way the process works, when we have a customer, we do the configuration, we gather the requirements, we do the configuration in our in-house, and basically when we show up to the customer, or when we implement, nowadays we're doing a lot of implementation online. When we implement the solution, as soon as we do the training, the business is operational. So there is no time for implementation. Typically people are operational the first day of training. You train and you become operational. Another question I got is, can you name documents and invoices electronically? When you get invoices, each vendor name his invoice in the way he wants. the solution automatically will name the invoice as per your standard. So you can name your own invoice the way you want, and you can set up your own workflow. I see a question: is the workflow done before an invoice would be integrated into the accounting system? Yes, the question is, can the workflow be done? Thanks, Dana. Is the workflow done before injecting that invoice into the accounting system? Yes. So the invoice is handled in the solution. You get an invoice. You trigger the workflow based on your process and your workflow, I mean, based on your requirements. If you say, okay, I want to do it by amount, or I have standard folks, 3 folks that need to look at that invoice, you launch the workflow. The workflow can be actually launched in a what we call robotic automation, so it can be launched automatically. And when that invoice, we can set up your system to have the invoice, only the approved invoices can be injected into your accounting system. So the workflow will happen before interfacing with your system, get the approval, and when the approval is done, we can inject that invoice into your system. That also depends on another thing. We do have an exchange between the system and the solution. So if you have an accounting system, and typically for the two-way, what we call the two-way and three-way matching. So you have information about the purchase orders in your accounting system, and you have the invoice that's come in. We can go get the information from an accounting system about that PO, the amount, the lines, the product. We can do the matching, and if you have that matching, you can then validate that invoice, inject it in the system. So the question, would we need separate support from our accounting system developers to help with the setup for Documentive? The way we do it is we do the configuration, the initial configuration for you, and we offer 2 training. One is a user training, and another one is an admin training. The admin training would include how to do a configuration if you need to do it. But the first setup, we do it for you. We come in, we get your requirement, we do the setup. The idea is when you have the solution, you're ready to go, you're ready to run, but we'll also train your admin team on the configuration in case you need to change it or add another configuration. The configuration is very easy to do, but also it's very easy to learn as well. But it's nice to have that ability to be able to configure yourselves. If tomorrow you have another entity or you want to do more of in a house, you can do that. Thanks for the question. Those are very good. Another question came from Nicole. So is there a purchasing vendor connectivity option to streamline the buy-in? Nicole, so I think I understand, but let me know if I don't understand, if I did not understand your question well. So when we have a purchase, so typically folks in business have what we call purchase acquisitions. Those purchase acquisitions basically is an internal request for a product or an item. That gets transferred to what we call POs, purchase orders, and that purchase order goes to the customer. Based on that purchase order, to the vendor, the vendors supply the goods, and when the goods are in, we do goods receipts, and then we get the invoice, and that's what we call the two-way matching, which is the invoice with the PO. The PO, the purchase order, is typically based on that purchase requisitions, and the goods receipt. That's the goods receipts. That's another element we match the invoice with. That's reason 3-way. So we have a match with the PO and match with the good receipt. Now your question about the purchasing process itself. Would you have the solution is a modular, so We have a module for accounting, for AP, but we also have a module for purchasing. So if you want to do the purchase acquisition in the solution, manage all your sourcing requirement, all your codes, all of that can be managed as well. Any type of document that you exchange with your vendors, or before even before reaching your vendors. So somebody makes a purchase rec. You go from your purchasing team is going to go and source the item in the market. We can manage those codes in the solution, and you have the accessibility to streamline the buying process. When you have that, we also have a functionality in the solution allow you to generate the PO directly from the purchase rack. So you don't have to rekey it, or we can integrate that data within your accounting system or your system if you're using POs in your ERP. But we do, to answer your question, we do have a module for purchase that streamline the buying process. And let me know if I did not answer your question. Is real-time inventory available when the purchasing? We do have, that's a good question. So in inventory, real-time inventory. So inventory, we do have a way how to manage inventory when it's, depends how complex your inventory is. If you're a manufacturing company, and we need to manage your inventory, we do integrate with another inventory management model solution that handles inventory in a complex inventory. But however, if you just have items and you're managing a bunch of items, and when you get them, you want to get receipts, your inventory to be adjusted. When you use that item, you want your inventory to be depleted. We can do that, and that's part of that purchasing model as well. We're talking about vendors inventory before purchasing. Are you, so Nicole, are you probably talking about items on, do you have, so typically we have an inventory, which means we buy the product from a vendor and we store the product in-house. You do have what we call, I'm not sure if that's you're alluding to, what we call products on consignment. So some vendors, I've seen that for with some of our customers, some vendors offer list of product in-house for that customer to use. So we will call them on consignment. So they put the products in-house for you. You can use them, and as you're using the product, they come and invoice you, and they invoice you on a monthly basis. Is that what you're alluding to? So vendors inventory before purchasing. That we can manage as well, if that's what you're alluding to. Because that's what I understood from vendors inventory before purchasing. Yes, in real time. Yes. So those are, so yeah. And for some, we also work with another technology, Nicole, is if you do have, so your inventory, if it's a high value item, so one of the healthcare institutions or organization we work with, they have high value items that sometimes 3,000, 4,000 a piece. And those we can manage the inventory using what we call a barcode technology that can track that item. Anytime that item is being used, so automatically will adjust your inventory. It will automatically show, and it will give you a report at the end of the month how much inventory you use of that, or how much of that item you used, or what's the list of the items that you have used. Hope that answered questions. Let me know if you have more questions, guys. happy to answer any question you may have. And I really thank you for your time. And those are really good questions. I'm going to wait a few seconds if there are any more questions. So no more questions. I thank you guys. Stay safe. If you do have any questions, I'm just going to share, before we go, I'm going to share the last slide for our contact information. So if you need to get in touch with us, please so do so. We have our emails. We're present obviously on social media and our websites as well. You can go to our website. You can connect with us. I also shared my contact information initially. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to go back to the first slide just to show you my number. And if you have my number here is 647-939-2128 as well if you need to touch base with us via phone. And I thank you, and I think there is no more questions. Thank you, guys. Have a great day and stay safe.